If you like, I would appreciate it if you could. First of all, so you can hear, and secondly, you'll be a part of the discussion. Candidates for the 94th House District seat being vacated by the legendary Bill Dyson. In fact, Bill Dyson said, give Bill Dyson a hand, would you please? Let's do it again, as we did in the previous forum in this early part of this late part of the summer, for the great work he's done for all of us and the sacrifice he's made for this community. Where we're going to proceed, in spite of the lack of microphone, will be as follows. We will have, after I introduce the panelists, we'll have 2 rounds of questions. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to respond to each question, followed by 1 minute rebuttal each, and then we'll go to the next question, so on and so forth. Once we go through the second round, 2 rounds of questioning by the panelists, then we will open it up, if time permits, to the audience here. And again, we ask folk here, whether you're partisan or not, to be respectful. Ultimately, it's ultimately about respecting the candidates, whether you disagree with them or not. No matter who you're supporting, just be respectful. That's all we ask of the comments and the comments that are made and responses that are made. First, let me add, before we open it up, just a couple of quick comments. As we all know, I mean, it's no secret, clearly, that 8 days, well, less than 8 days from now, this country will engage in an historic election. In fact, it's already started in some parts of the country. And irrespective of what happens come next Wednesday morning when we all awaken, we all realize that history will be made. No matter which slate wins, history will be made. Of course, the challenge for all of us will remain. The battle for political parity, economic equity, and social justice will continue. Will still have to be waged no matter who gets in. Let's be very clear. No matter who gets in, our struggle will continue. Racism and sexism, social injustice is not going to go away November 5th or January 21st, 2009, no matter who takes the oath of office in D.C. on that day. As long as we're clear on that. And NAACP has nearly 100-year history of fighting that battle. And I can only imagine, as you as well, that folk like James Weldon Johnson and W.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson, certainly Charles Hamilton Houston, Thurgood Marshall, Fannie Lou Hamer, our own Constance Baker Motley, are smiling down on us for the struggles that they waged here to make it possible for us to even see this day. But at the same time, I'm sure folk like Du Bois and Robeson in particular are admonishing us that don't go for the okie doke and realize that it's still America, there's still a system of injustice we have to fight. No matter who gets in the White House, one person, one man, no one woman not going to change that. It's going to continue to take our collective struggle to continue to make sure that, again, political parity, economic equity, and social justice are truly attained in this country. So as long as we're aware of that, as long as we're clear on that, then we can proceed and hope for the best, no matter what happens next Wednesday. Just this past Wednesday, some of us in this audience were attended a conference right here in New Britain at Central Connecticut State University, where disparities in the criminal justice, racial disparities were attacked and analyzed in the criminal justice system and how it impacts on black and brown children in particular. And we realized then, right here in Connecticut, our own state, although we're not a battleground state on the national scene, we're a battleground state locally in terms of these issues relative to our children, our youth, and our future. So we have to be engaged in that struggle today and tomorrow for the future. And just in yesterday's Hartford Current, the headline, the prejudice factor. Headline story, Sunday's Current. The prejudice factor, still real, still alive for all of us here, right here in Connecticut. Very real. So again, so let's don't be fooled. Or while we can have certainly be inspired and motivated by what's going on, and this is where we're going next week, in our own ways, in our own individual ways and perspectives. Let's be very clear. It's very clear that the struggle is far from over when it comes to racial and social justice. With that in mind, please give a warm welcome to our president of our Greater New Haven chapter at NAACP to formally welcome you to this event, Mr. James Weldon.
So we have an important election in the 94th Ward this year, and we're hoping that this evening we can have a discussion to inform all of the constituents relative to the election we're going in. The other thing that's going on is that I'm hoping that most members here, most everyone here, we come to the debates and we put a lot of programs on through the NAACP under the auspices of social justice. And we want to make sure that you support the NAACP. I'm hoping that we have some memberships here. So you're not a part of a membership, that's what allows us to have these kinds of forums so that we can talk to the community and have them understand the issues that are so important. So if you're not a member, please join, help us. You know, it's not only local, but national on the 4th of November. This is a referendum on America. We all know that. And I'm hoping that wise men and good men all stand up. And back to Mr.
John Daniels, from Alderperson Ron Gaddison, Alderperson Alfreda Evans, from Alderperson Jim Newton, Mayor Candidate Doe. Just give them a hand for being in the audience. As everyone in this room knows, being in politics is tough, especially in the black community. This is out. And so I think we should commend for it. It takes a lot of, I think, courage and sacrifice and commitment to you put yourself out there. So we acknowledge the folks who are here, who run for office, have been elected officials, who have served our communities, and certainly we thank and acknowledge the contributions of both Gary Whitfield and Willie Green for just even taking the time and the effort and making the sacrifice to even want to run for office and subject themselves to the kind of abuse that we're going to get tonight. And no, it's not, but seriously, to subject themselves to the rigors of a campaign, the sacrifices that are made, personal sacrifices that are made, even just to run for office, much less once you get elected, to deal with the challenges that await them. So we thank them as well and acknowledge their contributions. Let me introduce the panelists first before we get started. You already met Jim Rollins, our president. To his immediate left, the line Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and she also serves among many other things as first vice president of the Great New Haven NAACP, Dory Dumas. The chairperson of our communications committee for the NAACP, Great New Haven NAACP, Gary Smart. And to his left, Kathy Robinson Patton, first vice president of the Theta Epsilon Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority and member of the NAACP. She's a wife and mother of two. We thank Kathy Robinson Patton from NAACP. And again, since you heard, they represent the leadership of the AKs, we certainly want to acknowledge that sorority for its great work and voter registration over these last few months. I think with the conjunction with the NAACP, I think the AKs have registered well over 100.
More like closer to 500.
Excuse me, sorry. Get me straight. Over 500.
Closer to 500.
Mostly young people. They're going to the high schools and register young people in Great New Haven and give them a hand for that effort. And briefly introduce the candidates. They will certainly expound on this brief introduction. First, to my far left, former 14-year Alderperson of Ward 21, three-time majority leader and president co-chair of the 21st Ward, independent Democratic candidate for the 94th House District seat, Willie Green. Democratic clubs, member of the People Against Injustice, community activist, and of course the Democratic nominee for State Rep 94th District, Gary Whitfield. And round of 2 rounds of questions. All right, with that amount, I guess we'll start first with Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you very much, the NAACP, Alpha, okay, for hosting this forum. And I'm glad to see each and every one of you out here this evening. I have 14 years. I've run for the Board of Aldermen 7 times. Let me back up first, okay? I just want to take, if we can, Lincoln Bassett has a maintenance worker here who lost her daughter over the weekend, Florence Caldwell. That was my niece. So I'd just like to take a couple of seconds just in silence to bow our heads and just send out our prayers and support to the family, if that's okay. Thank you. Secondly, I want to say this before I get started. There has been some exchange between Mr. Whitfield and myself, and Mr. Whitfield, let me say this to you, if any time I've offended you, or you did say, I'm not going to say you said the paper said, because sometimes the paper does misquote people, that I ran a smear campaign, and if I did that, let me be the first to apologize to you, because that's never been my style. And I'd like to personally apologize to you and hope that you'll accept my apology if I've offended you in any way whatsoever. As I was saying, I have served on this board, served on the Board of Alderman for some 14 years. 3 times majority leader. I had the opportunity to serve under Mayor Daniels under a very most difficult time. I have also been responsible for administering as the co-chair of the Finance Committee. I've passed 14 budgets, so I know what it's like to sit there and have to struggle and make some very hard decisions about what has to be done to make this city operate. No one will understand any better than Mayor Daniels and what we had to go through when he was first elected. We basically had to think about how could we keep the lights on, folks. We were a bankrupt city. It was just that simple. I am also responsible, I'm one of the founding fathers for the Newhaltville Resource and Counseling Center, which started under an organization called the Newhaltville Neighbor Corporation, which I was there for 13 years. That program, I'm proud to say, is still operating. I was also the fiduciary agent responsible for going to Hartford and to DC to getting federal funding and state and local funding for this program. So I'm not new to this game. I'm very proud of my 30-year record. I've had 30 years of serving this community, and I've lived in this community for 30 years, and I know all the wards that it takes to make this family. And I have walked through every single one of them in the 32 years that I've lived in New Haven. So I understand the different needs that each ward needs to have addressed. It's not just a generic pill that we have to throw out here, because as I said, each ward has a different need.
14 years of experience, but I have walked all of the wards in the city. I've been accused of showing up in places where I don't belong. New Haven is a city that's not that big. We all belong in every ward, working with people to make New Haven a better city. I spent the last 8 years that I've been in the city involved from the time that I got in the city. Willie Green knows who I am because I've worked with Willie Green. I've worked with everybody, almost everybody in this room. And what I'm working on now is the same thing that I've been working on as a community activist. I'm working on social justice, which is the battle that Cliff Graves was talking about. What we're talking about here is, are we going to have someone that goes up to the State House to represent us, who's been working to represent us hard in the streets on those issues that Willie Greene's talking about? And if you want that, you're looking at a person who's been in the streets. If you go down to the drug spot right down the street, they know who I am, not because I was campaigning, but because I've been out there with them, trying to help those people. What I'm offering you is somebody who has worked hard, who ran against the very people that some of the people supporting my opponents said were trying to run a sham on you, so that we did not make those people stronger. What I'm offering you is somebody who is willing to go to work hard, who has been at the Capitol, not just in a job capacity, but because it's important. Because the issues that we're speaking about are important when you don't have a title, when you don't get paid, because they're important to the lives of the people who we're trying to represent here.
Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you. And I'm going to start the question with our president, Jim Rollins.
How do you want to handle this?
The question will be directed to both, and then both
okay, great. You both have spoken about what you've done historically. And I think this new opportunity is really about vision and about the direction you'll be taking the state at the state level. Can you speak to your vision, short-term and long-term, and tactically how you accomplish those things?
Thank you, everyone. Just how difficult we have, the difficulty we have in front of us. The city of New Haven is in dire conditions in terms of its finances, as well as the state. We have yet to understand exactly what the budget, the deficit is in New Haven. The clock is ticking. The last that I understood that is close to $200,000, $200 million from the state. One of the things that we have to do is talk about how do we work to bring that budget deficit in order here. What we have to do immediately is get an honest, I'm going to say it again, an honest answer from the city of New Haven in terms of what the real deficit is. 2, some hard cuts are going to have to be made on both the city and the state. The mayor and the city are going to have to work together collectively to make these things work. If not, folks, what we're going to see higher taxes. And I'm very concerned about the mill rate. That's another issue that we have to deal with. But this coming week, from my understanding, there's probably going to be another $40 to $50 million, 40 to 50 people laid off, I should say. So what we've got to do is, one, is get a good handle on the budget and the deficit. And the mayor himself has got to be honest. The Board of Aldermen has got to be honest too. And they're the checks and balances that makes this city work. And they've got to stand up and learn how to say, no. No more spending. There should be an immediate freeze on everything. The mayor's office, except for the fire, police. We need to keep an eye on that in terms of the overtime as well. But the Board of Aldermen has got to stand up and put his foot down and say there's not going to be any more spending, there's not going to be any more hiring until we have a true, realistic, defined budget. And we're sitting now operating without a budget, folks. Operating without a budget. Illegally operating. And the Board of Aldermen needs to step up to the plate. Two, we need to reduce, if you want to talk about having some accountability,
15 seconds.
we need to reduce the Board of Aldermen. Bring it down to 10. Bring it down to 10 people. We'll be able to attract a more diverse group of people who are really interested in seeing this city move forward and not be beholden to the city administration or the Board of Education. I'm going to say this quickly. If you work for the city and you work for the Board of Education, you should not be working on the board. You should not be on the Board of Aldermen, because you cannot vote independently, because they will control your vote, and folk know what I'm saying is true. I've been here 30 years, I've served 14 years on that board, and the moment you don't vote in sync with the administration, you're in trouble.
I think we're relating to the office that we're running for, which is state representative. My vision starts locally, but it has to be expanded to the state level. So if you ever see any of my campaign literature, there's a statement on it. It's different than the campaign literature you always see. It doesn't just have my name, it has a statement. And it talks about what you're seeing in the national campaign. It talks about there's hope, but beyond hope there's belief. And it is our job to make sure that the people who are voting for us can believe. So what we need to be doing at the state level is speaking to their issues in a way that gets their issues dealt with. So what I've done, I've been at the state level talking about the achievement gap, for instance. And when I talk about the achievement gap, I haven't gone there and say, the poor blacks and Latinos, they cannot achieve, so please help us. Because that's not going to move the people in the other cities and towns to help us. What I've done is I've said, look, if you pay attention to what's going on, you will see that this state is in a crisis. And that crisis is directly affected by this achievement gap and will be exacerbated by this achievement gap. And therefore, now you have a reason to pay attention to this. That's what we need to have. We need somebody that understands how to speak across the issues, across communities. That is what I see as my role as a state representative. What's going on the local level is very important, but my job is to be the state representative and bring your issues to the state. So dealing with the $304 million deficit that we have, if you read the governor's report that just came out a couple of days ago, you see that she's working on a plan. And so what we need to be doing right now, if we're going to be ready when we get to the state, is reading that and figuring out where she is so we know where we need to be and talking to the people who are there already to find out what they're doing. That's what we need to be doing. So my vision is I am the conduit through which your issues get to the state.
Racial disparities in the criminal justice system in Connecticut met in New Britain to discuss ways to address the gross issues that are happening when it comes to arrests, trials, convictions, and incarceration of people of color. What would you do as state representative to address this significant problem confronting our communities and our state?
This past week, when we were up there, we were talking about these issues. I think one of the things we need to do is have more panels like that, because we haven't had many of those. And what we did there was we brought people together who work on these issues, but they work separately, okay? And working separately is fine, but we have to have a collective understanding of where we're going. What we also need to do is start to talk about what really goes on in these communities. We've talked about nationally, locally, at the state level, we've talked about getting tough on crime. That approach has not worked. Anybody that's worked on these issues know that approach has not worked. The reason is, what we call getting tough on crime is not getting tough on crime. When you get tough on something, you have to go right to the core. The core of why we have what goes on is we haven't focused on education in these communities enough. We haven't focused on health disparities in these communities enough. we need to be paying attention to these things. And we need money to do it. So we need to do things like pay attention to where we spend money, which my opponent was talking about. But we need to focus on that a little bit different than we have. We need to say, well, we have communities that we're building, we have highways that we're building, and we're not working these two together. So you're going to spend money that you never thought you would spend. So we have to have a different transportation policy. We have a lot of things that we need to do, but what we need in a state representative to deal with these issues is someone that understands that all of these issues work in tandem. You have to be able to synthesize them. Someone who is speaking to being able to synthesize them, and that is what I have been doing, that is what I will do as your state representative.
As we all know, let's be honest, all politics are local. All politics are local. And my job as the next state representative is not to sit up in Hartford and listen to the people talk about what needs to happen. My job is to sit here in New Haven with the boards of education, with the various people that make up this beautiful 94th district, and listen to what they have to say. We have to define our agenda. It's not defined in Hartford. I'm not going to spend my time in Hartford trying to convince them. And I think it's insulting that I would have to do that, because the 94th district is just as much a part of the entire state of New Haven and the city of New Haven. It's a sad day when we have to stand here and say, well, you know, I'm going to spend my time in Hartford, and I've got to make sure that people understand what our time is about. But
not to cut you off, but
Thank you.
all right, but the answer to the question is that you have to start spending more time understanding education. You've not talked to Dr. Mayo. You've not talked to the people in the system. There's more going on within that district than you will ever know. You've not been here long enough to understand the difficulties, the obstacles that are there. I agree with you on one thing. We need to I'm going to back up and say this. All right, folks? I'm very much against panels. And I'm going to tell you why. We set up panels because most people set it up because they don't want to deal with the issue. It's a stalling issue. Let's be honest about that. I'm going to be very clear with folks. I've sat here for over 30 years, and every time there's a problem, there's a steering committee set up here. There's a panel set up here. You're not listening to us because we've not come to the table with a clear, defined issue. Education is a key in terms of what needs to be done. But what bothers me is that we're 19th in the nation in education and #1 in incarceration. So there's an imbalance there. We need to sit down and talk about getting real leadership that's going to stand up to the plate and make some definitive decisions that's going to elevate all our kids, and they can come out of school understanding what this society is all about and have the skills to compete for entry-level positions. So, you know,
I'm sorry, 10 seconds. Yeah, no, 10 seconds.
I thought I was finished. I'm pretty much finished.